Kafkaesque Kevin.
I'm depressed Dawson.
Nihilistic Nic.
And I'm Hot Dog Water.
We're all sad here. This is a sad
But it's hot dog water.
That's useless. Well, we're here to do our final lit project. I hate that class so much.
We're going to relate the theme of futility to all of the reading that we did.
The reading we did comprised of the novels, The Lesson Before Dying, which was an okay book, and then The Things That Carry. That book was awful.
That was the worst
It
book
was
in
bad.
the
It was such
history
a-
of books.
It was such a bad book. It was so bad. And then the play Death of the Salesman, and then a variety of short stories, poetry.
My use as a hot dog water in this project here is to relate the uselessness of life to the uselessness of hot dog water.
It's true.
Hot dog water is very useless,
It's so useful. That's a good metaphor, buddy.
Thanks.
but you're still too happy.
Sorry.
All right, Kafkaesque Kevin, you go first.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces.
Why? Hey, somebody, the chair's broken. Can we get another chair? Of course not. Can we move the camera down? Of course we can't do that either. What's the point? So, I'm here to talk about why the things they carried was futile. The war in general, they didn't stop the spread of communism. The U.S. went there and wasted their time, their people's lives, and all their resources and money, and it was just a very, very pointless sort of deal, and led to a bunch of people being with PTSD and Vietnam vets living homeless and killing themselves and other people, and people protesting our military, blah, blah, blah. The group of soldiers that they followed in the novel, it was also pretty futile. They had no control. Living and dying was a roll of the dice. Each step could be your last because you could blow your leg off. They were there even themselves wondering, what's the point? Why are we fighting? Why are we dying? Why are we doing something where we are fighting an enemy we can't see? And it's just hopeless. Why are we here? And another example that didn't have to do so much with the war was the First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross. He loved this girl back home who cared about him, but didn't love him like he loved, or didn't love him like he loved her. And it's futile. He keeps hoping and hoping, and that she'll love him back, and even though he knows she never will. And then in the first chapter on page 23, he even burns her pictures and her letters, but he himself recognizes that's a futile gesture. It doesn't change his love, or his love for her, or that she doesn't love him, and it also keeps it as he doesn't forget it. It doesn't make him forget or help him get over it. And then the last example was the soldier Norman Bowker. He tries to explain it. He even says on page 149, he has things like he could not describe what happened next, and not ever. He imagines himself how he'd talk about his experience in the war with all these people, and he just figures he can't. They won't understand. It's futile. It's pointless, and then he ends up killing himself. So in the end, you've got a futile war being fought by people who their efforts don't matter. Nothing they do affects the outcome of the war one way or another. They're living and dying for no reason. They're just small pawns. And then the ones that actually make it home, it's hopeless for them to try and love the people they left behind again, and it's hopeless for them to explain what they went through. It's life, man. There's no point.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need.
Me too.
I'm going to be talking about how the theme of futility relates to the novel A Lesson Before Dying. And one of the things in the novel was, even though Jefferson became an idol, they already had idols. And this is shown in chapter 12 on page 87. And they say, "All I could hear was Jackie this and Jackie that. Nothing about any of the other players, nothing about the Brooklyn Dodgers as a team, only Jackie. Jackie this and Jackie that." Another thing was that they did nothing to change the cycle in the town. The black people still always get treated worse than the white people, even if they're educated as Grant was. And even though Grant taught Jefferson how to be a man, in the end it didn't really matter because it didn't stop Jefferson from being killed. This is shown on page 252 when Grant says, "Yes, I told myself, it is finally over." And the last thing that I think is important is, regardless of how much Grant teaches and educates them, they are still viewed as slaves or animals by the white people. And this is shown on page 83 when, with the quote, "I'm going to show you how old hog eat," he said. He knelt down on the floor and put his head inside the bag and started eating without using his hands. He even sounded like a hog. This was when Jefferson was eating the food that Grant brought him, and Grant had been with him multiple times previous, and he still just refused to act like a human. Relating the theme of futility back to the book, Jefferson it's kind of futile with the efforts of Grant to Jefferson because it really doesn't matter because Jefferson is still going to die. And with Grant, they already have idols in the community, and even if he becomes an idol, it would only be in that community that Grant is an idol. And the novel was about like finding yourself and breaking away from discontentment, but there was still the underlying theme of futility throughout the whole book.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
I'm not sitting on this chair. I know full well it's broken. I was watching the other two. I know this is broken. Do we have like any other chairs? There's no chairs. God. Alright, I'll launch it. This is uncomfortable. This hurts a lot, but you know, life is pain, so like for my literature thing I did Death of a Salesman. It's a play, it's real great play about this really unlikable guy who's just a terrible person. And his whole life was really futile. It was pointless. He was somebody who wanted to be loved and admired by everybody. He wanted to have friends, he wanted to have fame, but he wouldn't work for it. See, it's all explained in a quote. It's and when I saw that, I realized that settling was the greatest career a man could want. Because what could be more satisfying than to be able to go pick up a phone and be remembered and loved and helped by so many different people. And this quote in reference is talking about a man he met a long time ago who was a salesman and inspired him to become a salesman. And the quote goes on, when he died, hundreds of salesmen and buyers were at his funeral. So Willie's whole logic is he wants to be a salesman so he can be loved and remembered by everybody. But he's just a bad person. You know, he projects himself onto his son. He wants his son to go be as famous as he is and as successful, but he's really not. He cheats on his wife. He's not liked at work. There's a point where during, I believe, the second act, his boss tells him he doesn't want him there anymore and he should take some time to rest. So Willie is really an unlikable person. So it's not necessarily that his life is futile. There was some times where, I mean, he did kind of work hard. He took a lot of road trips to sell things. He never really could sell though because he was just unlikable. But I mean, his lifestyle was futile because he lived all this time wanting to be somebody, wanting to be famous, wanting to matter to people, and in the end, he just kind of dies, and it's proven that nobody cared. Nobody shows up to his funeral, and nobody really cares. There's a quote at the funeral. His wife simply asks, "Why didn't anybody come?" And then she goes on to say how she can't even cry. She can't feel bad about it, and it kind of ends with her saying, "You know, we're free from it." I took it as they're free from Willie's kind of oppressive, horrible nature as a person. So this play really relates to futility in that his whole like lifestyle was futile. Like his idea of who he was futile, and what he did to accomplish it was really futile. He didn't matter to really anybody, not even his family.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness.
Alright, so I'm Hot Dog Water. I'm going to be relating futility of life.
Wait.
What?
Is this chair really not broken?
No, this chair works good. Why? What's wrong?
What's the point? Life is meaningless.
No, wait.
I don't get it. Why do I even try anymore?
No.
It doesn't make any sense. It's all pointless.
I'm sorry. Okay. Alright, so before we start, I need to get something out there. The views expressed in this video, in this section, are not my own. I'm pretty happy about my life, but anyways, beyond the point. So, futility of life in relation to Kafkaesque Poker Flat. In the short story, there was a man, a poker player, who won a lot of money from the town, and so a couple people out of the town, 5 or 6 people, came together and formed this committee, and they were deciding who to kick out of the town, and they kicked them out. Him and a couple other people out of the town, out into the wilderness to survive on their own. The short story ends with they were all trying to survive by themselves, and they just did not make it, and the main character, John Oakhurst, ended up dying. 1 or 2 people made it to the next town, but they all died in the wilderness. So in the Outcast of Poker Flat, the man, he wasn't a bad guy. I mean, he was a poker player. He was just an ordinary guy, just playing what he liked to play, but he did better than most of the people, and he was different, so they all kicked him out of the town, along with a couple other people, into the wilderness outside the town. And those people were trying to go to different people for help and trying to get help, but once they figured out what had happened, they just ignored him and just left him to die, and they all ended up dying in the wilderness in that part of the story. And that was very futile, because the people were just doing what they loved, and why, I mean, you're like, what is the point of life if you have to conform to everyone else's standards and what they believe, and if you can't just be yourself, you have to like blend in with the crowd.
Camera really still broken. We can't get anyone to move it down. No new chairs. Fine, whatever. I'll go into the poem, Those Winter Sundays. Basically, I mean, it's a pretty short poem, but this kid's writing about how his dad gets up extra early on Sunday, get their fires and all their stuff ready for church, so that when they get out of their blankets, the house is already warm. They don't have to try and polish their shoes and whatnot. But the kids aren't grateful. The dad obviously works hard during the weekdays to provide a life for his kids. Sundays are one of the few days he gets off, but he still gets up early and works hard. He gets up into the cold house, starts the fire to help his children, but they're unappreciative. I mean, what good are his efforts for if they don't realize it? I suppose you could make the argument that in the end, the author, by writing this poem, realizes what his dad is doing, but the fact that he's writing a poem about it instead of actually doing the decent human thing and thanking his dad means, I don't know, maybe his dad died, or there's just no point in talking to him because, yeah, he's dead. Life is futile.
The poem that I decided to talk about was Autumn Begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio, and it relates to the theme of futility and how the lives of the husbands doesn't really matter because they don't care about their wives, and it says that their women collect like starved pullets, which shows that they just don't really care about their wives and their home life, and it's futile because they just don't enjoy life, and the sons and their football career is all that matters to the husbands, and the kids will just follow their father's footsteps and be the same way as their father, which is futile because what does the football career even mean? Like, the football is pointless and it just leads them to nowhere, and they'll end up being just like their fathers are and not caring about their wives and caring only about their sons and their football career, which is just pointless.
Attaboy.
That's it.
I even got a sniffle in.
Sniffling.
My poem, I picked Ozymandias, which is a great one in relating to futility, as the entire sort of plot of the poem is futile, I guess. The empire of Ozymandias, who was a king who built this big empire, who wanted like all other empires to look at it. There's a quote, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." So he wanted kind of his empire to be, you know, the biggest, the best of the best. They wanted to like stand the test of time, but it just kind of faded off. Like the start of the poem is a man like meets with an older man who tells him the tale of Ozymandias, who tells him that the kingdom is out there, that it's kind of just decrepit and sitting there, surrounded by sand and desert, and nobody goes there anymore. So futility relates to this in that Ozymandias' kingdom, no matter how big he made it, it still was pointless in the end. It fell apart. Nobody talked about it anymore, and it sort of just became a legend for younger people that older people knew about. So that sort of ties in with the whole theme of futility in the poems we chose.
The last poem we did was a Ballad of Birmingham, which was a poem about a mom and a daughter in Birmingham, Alabama, back in the civil rights days, where the daughter was asking to go to a peace march that was happening downtown, and the mom did not want her to go. She said that it was going to be too violent, it wasn't a place for a little girl. She said, but instead you can go to the church and sing with the children's choir, which gives also it's a much safer place and nothing's really going to happen there. So the daughter goes to the church and she's in the choir, and then there was a big blast in the town and the church had been blown up. And the mom went to search for her daughter, and the poem goes that she found her shoe, but she couldn't find her baby, and which leads us to believe that her baby died in the bombing. So in this story, it really stuck out. It's kind of ironic that the mom says you can go to a safer place like the church, but that's ends up where she dies. And so that kind of shows that's the futility of life right there too. It's talking about how safe places aren't really safe anymore. Like you can go, like the church is always seen as a safe place. You can go there and be safe, but you can't really. So what's the point if no one can get along and you can't have a peaceful day without any riots or something? Really, what's the point of doing anything? You're just gonna people are gonna get mad at you.
So, wasn't already obvious this literature just shows us life is futile?
If you think about it, life really is just pointless.
Yeah, we're all dying anyway, so what's the point of living?
Wait, guys, can't we all just be happy? Like, come on. No? Okay.
This is a sad place.